2025. Should I repeat that? No. Okay, so here we are at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Pitkin County on June 3rd, 2025. We have a quorum. And is there anything that any staff comments on anything that's not on the agenda?
We actually do have the election of a chair and vice chair on the agenda.
But Zach's not here.
Zach's not here, so you have.
And kind of historically, if you're vice chair, you become the chair.
He's
then
not
somebody
here,
else.
so then it's really easy to
Appointed,
That
yeah.
does make it sound.
that, so your choice if you want to proceed with an election or
Anybody have any
push to the
thoughts,
next meeting.
whether we want to postpone?
He wasn't here at the last meeting either, which is why we set this topic over.
Yeah, it's true.
And I haven't, I guess, gotten an update on, the advertising for a new member. So I don't know anything on that front at this point. But, so you guys.
Anybody have any input, comments on that?
I guess I'd hate to, I agree he's not here and he'll probably do it. But if he had some specific reason that he didn't want to do it, do we want to give him the opportunity? Does it need to be done? It's not important. I would support him becoming the chair for sure. But if he's not here because something's happening in his life and he's gonna be resigning or something, then.
Well, let's wait one more meeting.
Push it one more, okay.
Okay.
We'll push it to the next.
Good.
Otherwise I didn't have any.
All right, any commission member comments on topics not on the agenda, other than the motion to close the airport?
But you close the meeting.
Any members of the public? No members of the public. So I think we only have one agenda item, which is the Penny Hot Springs location and extent review, which I don't know, I think, Doug, have you been on for a location and extent review yet? On any of these?
I don't believe I have.
Yeah, they're kind of a little quirky, I know. So we got Joe and Joe, right? So we got Joe M. So it could be Joan and Joe K, it could be Joe. So, interested in making sure you get the right Joe. So basically your location and extent review is limited to compatibility or consistency with the master plan. Pretty straightforward stuff, most part. And Suzanne, are you gonna present or
I am
Rebecca?
not. Rebecca.
I just want to introduce Rebecca Dunlap. She's been with us in September. And I'm just excited for her to get to present this case to you all and for you to get to know her.
She found a place to live.
I did find a place to live. I was originally in Glenwood Springs and now I'm in Willits, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
When I first moved to town, they're like, where do I find a job? You gotta find a place to live first.
Yeah. It's nice to meet you all. Let's see. Sure. Yeah, so I'm Rebecca Dunlap and I'm gonna be giving the community development staff presentation for the Penny Hot Springs parking, drainage and access location and extent review. And I'm gonna go into kind of the process, location, and compliance with the master plan, and then Carly is going to dive more into the design. So, looking at the process, as you said earlier, the purpose of this review is to determine whether the project is in conformance with the applicable master plan. In case of approval, the applicant proceeds to permit, and in case of disapproval, communicate the reasons. But the applicable master plan for this case is the Crystal River Valley Master Plan from 2016. And then the only other thing to note with this is it is exempt from Chapter 12 Land Use Code areas and activities of state interest because the applicant is open space and trails in Pitkin County. Looking at the specific code section, 9A, determining whether any proposed road, park, public way, ground, or space is in conformance with the master plan, which is again the 2016 Crystal River Valley Plan. And then looking at where the parcels of activity are going to be, there's 3 subject parcels. There's the Penny Hot Springs parcel, which is a small parcel encompassing parts of the Riverside, Riverside access and parts of the Hot Springs pools. There's the Aloha Meadows Hot Springs Ranch parcel, which is a very large parcel that partially encompasses the river and some of the pools and then extends out from Highway 133. And then where a majority of the work is going to be occurring is within a CDOT right of way, which is managed by Pitkin County per a lease agreement. And that contains the parking lot and extends out towards the hot springs a little bit, which we'll look at. So this is the existing Penny Hot Springs. You can see that is the small Penny Hot Springs parcel containing the pools and some of the access. This is the part of the Aloha Meadows Ranch Hot Springs Ranch parcel. And then it continues to extend out from Highway 133 into that open space. And then the CDOT right of way depicted here is where all of the work is going to be occurring. And you can see that that contains the parking and extends out from there. I'm going to give a brief project summary and then go into the compliance with the master plan, but a majority of the design Carly will cover. So looking at this project, it's primarily parking, or it is parking, drainage, and access. So the existing parking lot is going to be realigned and resurfaced, retaining about the same parking spot spaces, 19 out of 21 existing spaces. And then the edge is also going to be set back from the top of the slope with a split rail fence and vegetation. And you can kind of see, it's my mouse up there, right here, that's looking up at the current top of slope from the hot springs pools. So the parking is going to be pulled back off of where it's kind of eroding away from the edge right there. There's 2 existing public access trails that are going to be improved. Measures are going to be taken around these paths and around the eroding slope of the riverside to control of the erosion that's happening there, that you can also kind of see in that photo. And then this also does show kind of an existing trail that has either been come through erosion or use over time, and all of these existing social trails that aren't formally maintained will be revegetated. And then there's also a planned curb and gutter that's going to direct stormwater runoff and allow for water infiltration prior to meeting the Crystal River, and all native vegetation will be preserved where feasible. So kind of looking at what that'll look like, which Carly will dive into, just to give you an idea. You can see these are the 2 paths right here. This is the curb and gutter that I was referring to that would let out into the river right here. And then the parking lot changes right here. But Carly will dive into that deeper. So getting into staff analysis relating to the Crystal River Valley Master Plan. This master plan is contains primarily core values, goals, and strategies that match up with the values. So to start out, this is pulled from the introduction, kind of stating the overall goal of the plan. It states that the valley is first and foremost a place where preservation of the natural environment and the protection of rural character is valued. And specifically, they call out down here that they value the preservation of open space, wildlife habitat, the Highway 133 scenic corridor, and water quality in the Crystal River Valley. And then going into some of the goals and strategies that the project aligns with. This is pulled from section 5, environment and open space. There's a goal for future development projects to be sensitive to the unique landscape, physical features, and view sheds that define the Crystal River Valley. And then the promotion of environmental ethic, protecting wildlife habitat, air, and water quality. Looking at the project itself, improvements, specifically the access trails, are going to be form fit to the existing topography in order to minimize disturbance of that already eroding and unstable slope side. Native vegetation is incorporated to minimize the visual impact both from Highway 133 and from the hot springs pools themselves. And then as you saw in this imagery, all of the proposed improvements are within a previously disturbed footprint around Penny Hot Springs. And then current best practices are gonna be used in relation to water quality and hot spring source waters. I believe the hot spring source waters have been surveyed. And those will be avoided in terms of machinery and things like that. Looking at the objectives and implementing measures for that goal, one of the things they call out is to manage the public lands of the Crystal River Valley in a manner that places the highest emphasis on protection and preservation of the natural environment while still maintaining passive recreational use. I actually think this photo up here in the top right shows that passive recreational use pretty well with the wildlife viewing and people using the pools. But this project does focus on the protection and preservation of the Penny Hot Springs itself while enhancing the safe access for the passive recreational use that it does serve already. And then looking at the balance of environmental protection with that, the drainage improvements are gonna decrease runoff over the current parking lot. Currently, there's no drainage improvements in the area, so water runs off from the parking lot directly down into the pools. So this will hopefully have a positive impact on both the erosion and the water quality of those pools, and balances the need for environmental protection and the preservation of this compatible public use. And then from the master plan again, section 5 talks about recreation, objectives, and implementing measures. And one of the measures they have is to preserve access to recreational areas that meet the needs of the Crystal River Valley planning area. And so I kind of called out the 2 formalized safe access trails that will preserve use to the area while hopefully having a positive impact on the slope and not further damaging that aspect of things. And then the improvements themselves do strive to meet current safety and user needs while not increasing overall traffic to the area. So the goal really is to improve the use that is already occurring in the area without increasing the overall traffic to the area.
Joan, excuse me, I have a question about the former slide. Can I ask you now before I lose it? Would you go back to, under drainage improvements, when it says it allows for infiltration? Does that mean, I would have thought you would have said filtration, but infiltration into the soil, is that what you're talking about?
That's a great catch, mostly filtration, but water could infiltrate, but we're primarily providing for filtration.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thanks. Thank you, John.
See. And then looking again at the master plan, section 7 talks about transportation objectives and implementing measures, and we pulled the need to identify specific locations and options for improving pedestrian safety and highway improvements within the Crystal River Valley planning area. And so this is a photo that kind of shows you as well how close the parking lot goes to the edge currently and where some of that, where that would be taken back from the top of slope. And that really does prioritize user safety with the adequate backup space provided and the increased setback from top of slope with the split rail fence and vegetation installed there. And then last of this,
I'm sorry. I think it's just easier if I jump in with the
Yeah,
picture
go
you
ahead.
just had up. Can you
Okay.
go back to the prior slide, please?
yes, this one.
Yeah. One of my concerns was whether the cars will have to back out and into the 133 corridor when they're backing out, if the rail is placed further from the edge. And I noticed in that picture, I think that's a Pitkin County vehicle. One of y'all's when you wanted to take this picture. And the way you parked was slanted, which is the way I parked when I went out there too, so that I wouldn't have to back straight out. But currently I have the parking straight out. I just want to look after, the commingling of backing out into pretty high-speed traffic.
Mhm.
It's downgraded to 45 through there, but I've seen people just, they want to either get out or they want to get home, and that's a place they can go pretty fast through. And there's some
I can
curves.
touch on that in the slides that I have.
Thank you.
Perfect. And then looking at the referral comments that we got on this project, we received 6 comments from the zoning officer, planning engineer, public works engineer, Healthy Rivers and Streams, Colorado Geological Survey, and Carbondale Rural Fire Protection District. And I'm gonna touch on they're all included in the packet, but I'm gonna touch on the ones that resulted in something in the reso, and then I think Carly's also gonna touch on some of the other referral comments. But from the county engineer, we have the requirement of a floodplain permit and statement of no rise, which I believe Open Space and Trails has ready to provide, and then also documentation of permits and or permission from CDOT for all of the work that's gonna be occurring in the right of way. And then from Colorado Geological Survey, they called for a site-specific geologic hazard evaluation to assess slope stability, stream bank conditions, subsurface characteristics, and the potential effects of construction on the hillside and river corridor. So that has been included as a condition of approval in the resolution. And then something to call out here as well, the letter of no rise with supporting modeling is not currently included in the resolution, but it will be added to the resolution. And with that, staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission find that location and extent review for Penny Hot Springs parking, drainage, and access improvements is in conformance with the objectives of the 2016 Crystal River Valley Master Plan, subject to the draft resolution. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Carly?
All right, let me share my screen here.
I have a question. Can I start with my questions?
Yeah.
The referral comment from Colorado Geological Survey that requires an evaluation, how will you handle the response of their evaluation if it hasn't been done yet? Like, what is the process for them giving feedback from a full evaluation and further research and then incorporating that into this plan that we're looking at now?
That is a question that I have. Hello, I'm Carly O'Connell. So I work over in Pickens County Open Space and Trails. I'm the landscape architect and planner there. So I've been managing this project. Again, my landscape architecture title precludes me from designing walls or slope stability analyses, but from the outset, we have worked with our engineer on that question, and it was determined that a slope stability analysis was not needed for this project. So we did not pursue one. When we talk about the erosion, it's largely the erosion of the asphalt because it's built at the top of the slope, not necessarily that the hillside itself is eroding. So again, I'm no engineer, but if this is a condition of approval, then the way that I would see it, and Suzanne, correct me if this is maybe out of line with the way it would work with the location and extent review, is that the intent of this plan that we're presenting to you would likely would not change. But perhaps there might be some additional stabilizing improvements that might need to be done if the results show that that's needed. But that would still be within the scope of the.
Right, I think this addresses, the project sort of more broadly. And then, if they go to permit on these specific pieces of this project, if at that point it was determined that they needed to do additional engineering, whatever it might be, that would be a condition that would be addressed at permit.
Okay, thank, because I imagine there could be some findings that would have to be incorporated that might change what we're looking at today. It might look nice in this picture, but if they come up with issues related to degradation of the slope, then what we're looking at would change substantially.
Perhaps, but the way that it's been described to me is that, if you want to take a dive into some history, the Penny Hot Springs Management Plan has a great historical history section. So essentially this highway pull-off has been created, by CDOT. So whenever they've done earthwork in the area, they have just kind of pushed the rock and fill material into this location, essentially building up this highway pull off, extending it, and this place in the way that it is today has basically been just the same for the last 20 years. There's not been much movement. The asphalt, however, every time they chip and seal up there, they keep pushing it further and further out too. So the asphalt keeps going farther up onto the hillside or onto the slope. But I think great points, and we will, if that's a condition of the application, we will certainly explore that.
It certainly doesn't look like a stable slope.
It's not.
Those
Yeah,
folks,
I guess-
I'm not a structural engineer or a civil engineer, but if they were headed to do soil nailing or an MSE wall or something like that, it's not gonna really change the look of what I'm seeing here. There's ways that I believe, just from experience, that they can stabilize that wall if that's what becomes necessary and keep a fairly similar. If MSE wall with boulders like that or something would essentially give an engineered solution, which isn't gonna change the look a lot. It's gonna be more formalized, which I understand from the packet that the Crystal River Valley people don't want. But I don't think it's gonna really change the parking or the trails or any of those other pieces. Okay, you might take.
If it did, then we would probably have to really take a hard look at this project because it may be out of kind of scope and scale of what the community has desired. So,
There's just no way of knowing at this point what they're gonna come back with, and it might not look different, but it might. So that's my concern.
My concern is that maybe it needs to act differently and we don't know it. Maybe if the studies haven't been done yet to tell us whether it's stable enough.
so.
And I'm talking about beyond the parking lot.
Yeah, so all I can say is that the engineer that has prepared the stamped drawings has determined that a full-blown slope stability analysis is not needed.
I see.
That being said, we have worked with Lodic water engineers on the hydraulic flow and the push of the river. So we have really focused on the water dynamics on the bottom of the slope, the toe of the slope. And so that is sort of the stabilizing, that's the area of stabilization that we have focused on. So if I can dive in, I think maybe I can answer some of the questions that maybe have led to why our engineer is not as concerned with the slope stability of these sections, and largely it's because we're not touching them. So I'll just.
And let me just interject for a
Yeah.
second. So it's my understanding that the Colorado Geologic Survey, they're a referral agency. They don't have any authority to require the county to do anything, frankly. Except take into account their comments.
There are expert,
Yeah.
referral. I mean, obviously, right, we don't have the same expertise that they do, so.
Right.
Right, if they're making recommendations,
Usually
generally
we'll
that will
follow.
show up in a condition of
Right.
approval, but I feel like this, again, this is kind of almost, I think of it as kind of the master plan for this property. And, you know, it, right, based on funding and all of the other things that have to fall into place, will determine what pieces or all of this project will move forward. And I think, as Carly said, if there's a further investigation related to stability that, you know, turns this into something other than this, for first place for that to go is back to the open space board to determine if it's even a project they're going to pursue. This kind of lays the framework by going through the LNE that allows them to go forward with the further investigations that would lead to permitting. You know, and I think, you know, that remains to be seen kind of where that might all head once they've kind of gotten through those steps. So in a way, there's a lot of detail and engineering that's been done. But as with a lot of our other, if this was a site plan project, you're right, there are additional things that will be done with more detail at permit to ensure, and maybe at that point it changes what this is and we'll have another conversation, or maybe it, you know, comes off the table.
So we would be approving it conditional to that kind of study being done. Is that right?
Right.
Yes, and just, you know, we're not opposed to doing that study. It just hasn't been recommended so far by the consultant team that the county has hired. And I think as we talk through some of the pieces, maybe that will become more clear.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I know that it said that you won't be touching the river pools themselves. But is it close enough, or is there some necessity that the Corps of Engineers would get involved?
Yes,
Because the
and-
way the river
Yeah.
flows, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. If I can just back up a second, I just want to remind everybody of all of the public process that we have done to this point that has led to the plan that we're showing you. So in 2020, we did a management plan. And the biggest concerns that came out of that plan, or from that management plan outreach, was safety, accessibility, and user behavior at the hot springs. And so, one of the main management actions in that plan was to pursue stabilization improvements, and improvements to the pullout. So the management plan directed open space and trail staff to pursue that. So in 2021, we worked with CDOT so that we could secure a lease agreement in order to pursue some of those improvements. As you saw, we don't own all of the collection of parcels that make up what we know of as Penny Hot Springs. So once that was secured, we began schematic design with SGM engineers. And we worked with CDOT on their reviews, reviewing comments on that. Then from there, we worked in the fall of 2022 to solicit community input, and I'll go through many of the questions that came out of that. I'll show you some alternatives of why we ended up with the parking configuration that we have. And then following the community input in 2023 to 2024, we worked through 100% construction documents. So where we are now is this planning and zoning review. We would pursue permits and of course, any additional information that comes out of this meeting for those permits. And then potential construction. Summer 2026, though, again, I want to emphasize date subject to change. Open Space and Trails, I'm sure you've seen, has acquired many properties recently, and some of those properties may take precedent over this project. So the vision initially from the outreach with community members in the 2020 management plan set these design principles that Penny should remain this natural and undeveloped experience. It should be accessible, meaning free. It should remain scenic and peaceful. It should provide connections to wildlife and nature and honor this community spirit. Those pools, Open Space and Trails does nothing to create those. There are designated leaders or pool managers that go out there and move those rocks around.
Who designates those people, do they?
I am unaware, and I have tried not
No, I get
tried
it,
not
that's
to.
fine. Yeah, yeah.
But there are, there's there's self-proclaimed mayors of Penny Hot Springs. It is a place that has a long, and you know, prior to what we know it today, it was a train stop. So the train would stop there. There was a concrete bathhouse, in the Faloha Meadows area. So people get off, enjoy the hot springs, and then, you know, as the 70s came, people took off their clothes and would bathe in the area. So then some of the locals poured concrete on all of the hot springs. And the hot springs came back, so they're pretty resilient.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
You forgot you were there?
Forgot what I was wearing.
It's got a storied history, and I think, you know, that we don't want to lose that. We heard loud and clear that this should not become another Iron Mountain Hot Springs. This is Penny Hot Springs. It is different. Okay, so into the site analysis, we have seen as many as 40 people on busy days on the riverbank. And, you know, users represent a range in age from, you know, the folks that were there when they saw the concrete get poured over the hot spring sources, to many young families with kids. The parking can be a mess. So here is, you know, just a day out there. There's a cooler in the highway in this photo. Access can get pretty treacherous in the winter. And even in the summer, you know, able-bodied folks like myself and Rebecca, we were out there climbing around. It's not easy to get down to. The elevation drops approximately 20 feet from the parking area to the hot spring sources. In a pretty sheer, you know, 1-to-1, 2-to-1 slope. The hot springs, as we mentioned, have all been surveyed, so we have those sources located. This photo, if you can start, just that's that asphalt. So again, as CDOT has extra chip seal, you know, asphalt, they've just put it out here, and their perspective is, let's just make it as big as the shoulder is. So they've just pushed asphalt. So when I talk about erosion, I'm less talking about the slope eroding and more of the parking platform eroding on the top of the slope. And to us, that's a significant public safety concern, because if asphalt is there, people will pull up to the edge of the asphalt, and our rangers have this fear of that asphalt breaking and cars going over. So that is the erosion that I'm really talking about. You know, there's some rare orchids that exist near these hot springs. Obviously, the bighorn sheep are a huge draw, elk as well. And then because it is such a loved location on the Crystal River, there are several construction considerations. You know, open space and trails being a department that manages open spaces and natural resources, we would seek to go above and beyond requirements for construction of in water construction requirements. So, you know, in this location, there actually aren't many requirements from CPW to avoid in water construction at many times. However, our natural resource ecologist would require us to avoid construction at any time in the water when there's fish spawning, or at times when we might disrupt bighorn sheep. So we have placed higher limits to the construction timing than may be required of a typical project in this area.
Can I point out something
Mhm.
to the group? I really want to express my appreciation for noting the vegetation and the orchid. Because to my knowledge, we don't protect plants. We don't have that written into the land use code. We talk about animals. The state of Colorado does not consider plants endangered in the same way that we think of with animals. So thank you for going into that.
Yeah, that is a thing that we do at Open Space and Trails. We track, you know, all of our imperiled plants or sensitive plants. So we would survey before any construction. so here are your existing conditions. This brown line, which I'm seeing is a little difficult to see here, but it's right here, is the top of the slope. So this is what has been surveyed as the top of the slope. So right in locations like this, you can start to see that the top of the slope and the asphalt edge are meeting. And then in other cases, there's space between the asphalt edge and the top of the slope. You have the hot spring sources marked, you have the high water line, existing trees, and then that current distance from the edge of the asphalt to the highway white line is about 33 feet. So that's that number I said, keep in mind. So when I talk about pulling back the parking edge, in this location, we would be pulling it back about a total of 3 feet. 1.5 feet for the curb and gutter, 1.5 feet of the parking edge. So we'd pull back 3 feet, so you'd have 30 feet in this location. So a typical parking spot is right, anywhere between 18 to 20 feet, and then you should provide about 8 feet of backup space. So in this location, head-in parking would be safe, but it's not a consistent distance. So over here, you drop to about 28 feet, and over in this location, I think 27 feet. So there's a little bit of the location as it is today. This slide really shows those top concerns from the 2020 Penny Hot Springs Management Plan, and how the suggested list of improvements meets those concerns. What we have taken out are striped parking spaces, defined points of ingress and egress, and highway traffic, and I'll get into why with these alternatives here. So when we started this project, we tested a number of solutions. The first being what if we just improved the trails? The second was what if we provided head-in parking? And the third is angled parking, and this line right here is a raised barrier so that you could have a defined point of ingress and egress. You can start to see that this option, took the 20 parking spaces down to about 9 spaces, created these very large areas where no parking would be allowed because turning movements would have to be accommodated. And our ranger saw that and flagged that and said, people are gonna park there no matter what. So this, you would basically create a situation where no one could get in or out of a parking area that we created. It was determined that this option was not feasible. This alternative 1 was also dropped from consideration because the Open Space and Trails Board was more concerned with, well, if we're going to be out there improving the trails, let's provide a sustainable parking edge that addresses these the runoff concerns of the water going straight into the hot springs, these safety concerns of parking going straight up to the edge. So we took alternative 2 and created a couple different created a more refined alternative, and brought that to the public, along with, we kept that option 1 with just the trail improvements. And so we brought these 2 options to the public to get input. And what we learned is the community wanted to see a hybrid of these. So, no head-in parking spaces, just sort of keep the ability for users to pull in at an angle, whichever angle they're coming from, so they can back out in the angle that they want to leave from, so that you're not creating a situation where everyone must park in the same configuration. This allows for some flexibility with oversized vehicles and trailers. And so a hybrid of these 2 led to the preferred alternative. Oops. This slide shows the public outreach. The list of public outreach events that, we undertook to come up with the preferred alternative, so. A number of, site outreach events at Penny Hot Springs itself. We were at First Friday, we did an online survey, we had about 100 and, almost 170 survey responses. We visited the Crystal Caucus, the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board, and the Redstone Community Association meetings. And again, all were in support of this hybrid option. And then, so this preferred option was brought back to a steering committee. That's one thing I didn't mention. At the outset of this project, we created a steering committee of, community members, representatives from the Crystal Caucus, the Healthy Rivers and Stream. We called them super users, so people that use the hot springs weekly. So we had about 10 people on this stakeholder or steering committee that helped with the design decision throughout. So they met 3 times. And the plan that you are looking at today was approved by the Open Space and Trails Board. So let's get into this plan. So here it is. So we have that, that parking edge is pulled back about 2 to 3 feet from this point. So it may get, it gets pulled back. It varies in width, but the whole parking platform is taken from the edge of the slope and pulled back so that we can install that fence, get vegetation to grow, and put in that curb and gutter to direct water into the Crystal River in one location so that we can maximize that filtration of the water before it enters the river. The slopes in between 2 access points really remain untouched. So, you know, again, I think that is one of the reasons that led to our engineer determining that the slope stability study was not needed, because the 2 access points that we are improving are the 2 access points that are existing. And then there's 3 others that would be closed. There's one closed over here. There's another closed that goes straight down, and then there's another closed right here. So these paths already exist. So what is contemplated is putting some stones to create steps and anchoring them in with some boulders. So it's a really low touch improvement on this steep slope in those areas. I don't want to repeat what Rebecca said here, but I think I want to pause for any questions that we might not have covered on this, or remind me if I had said there was ones I was going to cover.
I just was gonna say, no wonder you were eager to tell us what has already been done. That's a lot. A lot, and you must be just sick of it by now. No, don't.
I will never be sick of Penny Hot Springs.
That's
Penny
it.
Hot Springs, the people that use this place love it. You know, there's many that don't want to see much change, but there are many that also recognize that a lot of the users are aging. Perhaps having a safer way to get down would be easier. They're also noticing that there's a lot more kids with families with kids. So improving the access could be beneficial. So yeah, again, a lot of studies have been done to come with this preferred alternative.
You talked a little bit about the drainage plan and the infiltration.
Yes, so right now, water, you can barely see these grading lines, but so water kind of just sheet flows across the asphalt and just dumps off of the parking platform wherever it's being captured from. So this curb here would start to collect water, and it would direct it. This is actually not the correct location anymore. What is the correct location? Let's see if I can find a pen. So the water would be directed this way, and then it would continue this way and come out here.
What's the black line that goes up at the angle point of the parking there?
That was the old, that was the old line.
I see.
That was where it was. So
Is it like captured into a basin and then go a pipe or?
it's not captured
flows?
through a basin, so it would come through here, there'd be, it would come across here, so there'd be a swale, a vegetated swale.
Uh-huh.
As it comes through this location, and then we would install riprap. In this location to direct it down into the Crystal River.
So it's basically the same drainage that's going
Exists
down.
now, it's just going in a
Right,
different
it's
spot.
just being,
It's concentrated.
right, direct.
But it's not,
Yeah.
it's also stopping all the water running down the slope, just causing the erosion. Well, actually, the curb and gutter solves 90% of the erosion problem, I would postulate. Cause you're no longer running water down. Other than what's falling on the sea.
CDOT salt the highway or anything like that?
Yeah. I don't believe they solved it.
Put night chloride.
Yeah.
Is there consideration of putting the porta potty inside the curb so that leakage would follow the same route?
We hadn't considered that. I don't know that we've had much, there haven't been any leakage concerns with the porta potty. However, after installing the porta potty, the number of human waste locations that we have found has significantly decreased.
The other reason I ask is we had one or two porta potties set on fire at Spring Gulch this season due to vandals.
Really?
I-
I was on maternity leave.
Just wouldn't want the poop to go into the hot springs area.
Yeah. This one has stayed. It was a contentious thing at first, but people have come to appreciate that it is there.
You are on the state highway, at that point, you're a little more visible than up at Spring Gulch.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but high school kids will be high school kids, right?
So it was pretty disruptive this year.
Yeah, no.
I answered your question on the backup space. Another thing I'll add to that, the Crystal Caucus's chief concern with this site continues to be highway safety. We have pulled traffic accident data from CDOT. There have been about 4 accidents in the last 10 years in this stretch of highway, and all 4 of them have been the result of boulders it's a rock fall. So behind this site, if you were to turn around, there's that massive rock fall retaining wall. So that may solve those rock fall traffic concerns or safety concerns with vehicles. There have not been reported accidents to CDOT's reports from users in this location. However, CDOT has installed heavy roadside activity signs on either side of the hot springs now. And we are working with them to try to get this area striped as a no passing zone. So that is one thing we are trying to do.
I thought it was a no passing zone, but I'm given comfort for some reason reviewing the presentation. I thought you were doing the striping and keeping it pure.
It was originally the idea, right? Like, let's maximize, let's be efficient with the parking, let's keep it orderly. But what just kept what was pointed out is that, users, they pull in the direction that they either are gonna be leaving or whatever is easiest for them to get in or out. And honestly, we're not looking to maximize parking in this location. So if people are parked in 2 different angles, that's okay.
Any other commissioner comments, questions? This is a public hearing, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
So you guys provided the public notice to staff. Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there any members of the public here to make comments? No.
Sorry, I did have one more.
Okay, well, yeah, you're not a member, a general member of the public, you can comment whenever you want.
The two questions I had, is there a requirement for ADA access? And then secondly, what about winter maintenance? Cause I feel probably we build it, we own it.
Yeah,
So would we have somebody removing snow or making sure there's not ice buildup on those steps?
we would not, so this is a trail, it would, essentially operate as all of open space and trails, other trails, which is, you know, our soft surface trails or natural surface trails are not, maintained in the winter. That being said, our hot spring super users may take it upon themselves to maintain it a little better.
So this would still be soft surface?
It would be a mixture of, you can see here, these stone steps. So there would be stone steps whenever there is a step, and then there'd be a soft surface,
Oh.
Stretch. So this is sort of the, section of what the trail would look like as it comes down. See if we can find- And again, well, it just comes down this way. And so, you know, ADA access is not required for trails, in open spaces. We do want to provide a small section of handrail, next to the trail. You know, in order to provide an ADA, ramp from the 20 feet, 20-foot drop would turn this into an entirely different
A slide.
experience.
It wouldn't be an ice slide.
Well, we would maintain it, so if it was a paved ramp,
Location.
we would then maintain it, but it would require such significant retaining walls to create, which is just outside of the realm of, you know, the interests of the community members.
Mhm.
That being said, we think of accessibility across a spectrum, and we think there are many other similar, no hot springs places, but there are ADA accessible river opportunities such as at North Star, that we offer. So if you think of our entire system, we do have river experiences that are ADA accessible. This one just would not be.
Yes, thank you again. For some reason, reviewing the presentation, I didn't get that it was staying soft surface, not being paved.
Yeah, if it was paved, we would certainly have some winter maintenance. So CDOT would still plow as they do now. So those plow spoils would be pushed to one side of the parking lot or another. But so the parking lot would be maintained. That's all I have in here for slides, so.
Anything else from the commission members? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Does someone want to make a motion? Or want to have any further discussion?
I'll move to approve the resolution as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Doug. We have a second to that motion.
Second.
2 seconds.
Joe.
All right. I'll take a vote then. All in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None, so the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Again, can't give you an exact date of when we would pursue construction. Obviously, there's a permitting process to go through, but we're looking forward to improving this public amenity.
Well, thanks. That's a great presentation and obviously a lot of work that's been done. Lead up to this.
I did think of 2 things to add that have nothing to do with this project, if you're ready for those,
Oh, sure.
if you're good. One is that Hannah Hunt had her baby last.
She did.
Welcome to Wayne Wander. I can't remember his middle name. But yes, Wayne Wander, I think May 28th. And your next meeting dates does not show June 17th, which we are planning to have a comp plan discussion on the 17th, so keep that one on your calendar.
That's not a joint meeting.
No, not the June meeting. And then right now we have tentatively, we figured nobody wanted a meeting on the 1st of July. So we're looking at July 15th. I may have that RS government zoning for you. That's sort of tentative right now. July 22nd was the proposed joint meeting, which is shifting. We still want to hold that date. But we're rethinking whether that's gonna be a joint meeting with the BOCC or something, but we will keep that on your docket. But those would be the two meeting dates for July, then would be the 15th and the 22nd.
Can you briefly speak to the rezoning of the government lands?
The board has directed us to look at rezoning public lands, Forest Service, BLM, state lands to the resource government zone district that exists in the code as a zone district, but it has never been applied anywhere in the county. So we're just starting to kind of look at that. Mostly right now, GIS has been working on the mapping that would go along with that to designate, but then to basically bring forward a rezoning to the PNZ and the BOCC for any of those public lands in the county, excluding ski rec, which has already a lot of, not all, but a lot of is public lands, but has already gone through a master planning process for those properties.
What's the concept? Think we have any authority respect to?
So